ETFs are a basket of investments that track an index and trade on an exchange like a stock. Most ETFs will follow a benchmark, and a benchmark represents the overall market average like the Dow Jones Industrial Average or the S&P 500. Those are the two most popular benchmarks that many mutual funds track their performance against.